I'm Max Clark. Let's talk about circuit provisioning. We used to just call this telecom circuit or network circuit or fiber circuit. Now people want to call it connectivity because for some reason connectivity is better. So if I bounce back and forth between calling it a telco and fiber and connectivity, it's because I'm just as confused as you are when it comes to what we call these things nowadays. Let's get into it. I get asked all the time, like, how long is it going to take us to get this circuit? How long does it take to get a circuit? How long does it take to have fiber installed? How long does it take to get blah, 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 blah? Before anything else, I've talked about it in the past. I'm going to talk about it again right now. If you are ever engaged with a salesperson at any company and they tell you it's going to take 25 days for this circuit to get installed, they're lying to you. You know, I try not to use strong language like that all the time, but I'm just going to tell you, they're lying to you. They do not know. The way this works is you're going to sign the order, and the second that you sign the order, they're going to submit it, and they move on. It doesn't matter. They're not involved anymore. So they could literally tell you that unicorns exist, and it doesn't impact them, because now, by the time you realize you're not going to get that circuit in 2 weeks, they're so long gone, and you're so pot committed that there is just nothing's going to happen. Maybe you complain to somebody else who has to go chastise them, but at the end of the day, they've got the order, they get the credit, they get the comp, and they've moved on to the next. We do not promise installation dates. We just don't. You can't. It's impossible. And anybody that's promising you an installation date is lying to you, and just know that. So if you want to be lied to, just accept it. If you want to understand the truth, just know that there's no such thing as a guaranteed installation date. If you're going into a data center, that's a little bit different, but let's just keep this at like on-premise installations. Let's talk about the process a little bit. When you receive, what you're going to receive from a network provider, you're going to receive a service order. So you can say it like a SO or an SOF or an order form. They're going to have different acronyms depending on what actual carrier it is, but you're going to get an order form, and that order form is going to reference a master services agreement. A master services agreement is then going to reference some schedules, and there's going to be addendums. And depending on the size of what you're buying and what your legal overhead is like, you're going to negotiate and want to probably do revisions of the MSA, the SLA, the addendums. I talk about this a lot. There's other videos you should watch. There's some important things that you're going to want to look for and negotiate in these documents. And by the way, I have never seen a company negotiate any paperwork in a legal process in faster than 2 weeks. So if you're not already accounting for that in your process in terms of your timeline or communicating that with other people inside your organization, you should start. You know, how long is this going to take? Well, you should say language like, it's going to take us on average X days after our legal review, which we see takes 4 to 6 weeks, right? Okay, because that you control to some degree, I guess. You know, it's kind of on your plate, or it's another department's plate, so you can create pressure there if necessary. Oh, we need this. We just signed a lease for our office space. We need to have internet in 2 weeks. Okay, great. Go tell our lawyers that they can't negotiate for 6 weeks on the circuit. You know, like, first things first, you want this circuit in 3 weeks, you can't waste 6 weeks negotiating, you know, paperwork. Like, let's be really realistic here in terms of our timeline. So anyways, you have gone through your approvals process, you've gone through your legal review process, you've signed paperwork, you've sent it, and you've submitted it. First thing that happens is what's called order acceptance. Order acceptance is the process the carrier is going to go through, the provider is going to go through to take your order and to actually load it into their system. And the specifics of this depend on the provider. Basically what they're doing is, think about it like, okay, somebody's actually taking and like typing into a computer system, like think like a little squirrel going and typing into the computer system. Maybe they have an integrated ERP, you know, CPQ tool, and they have to go in and they have to click the accept button. You know, there's some process. There's a person doing something. And by the way, that person has a lot of other things that they're doing as well. So your order is going to the bottom of some stack and just waiting, you know, for it to come through. Depending on the provider that you're dealing with, part of that order acceptance process, if you don't already have a profile in their system, they have to go through the RevOps or SalesOps processes to create your profile in their system, to create you in their provisioning platform, billing system, ERP system, whatever it is that they're using. And also depending on the provider and the size of your order, you're going to go through a credit check. This is why, you know, having your FIN and DUNS number on paperwork that gets submitted up to the provider is so important, because it, you know, if it's not there, all it happens is they get to that point and they go, oh, hey, we need your FIN and your DUNS. And so you get an email, it takes you a couple of days, you return it back, it goes back on the bottom of the queue. It takes, you know, another week for them to look at it and then enter the stuff in. On average, we tell people that we see it usually takes between 7 and 10 days for order acceptance and order entry. That's a pretty normal timeline. Some people are faster, some people are slower. It depends a lot on the provider you're dealing with and what the order is. 7 to 10 days on average in order acceptance. This is why when I start off with and I say, if somebody promises you a circuit in 2 weeks, they're lying to you, because they're lying to you, because their internal process just to do order acceptance and order entry is going to take a week and a half. How are they going to deliver a circuit to you in 2 weeks if it's going to take them a week and a half just to do order acceptance? What happens after that point? After order acceptance and order entry, then you're going to go into another queue, you're going to go into another process, then you're going to get it to assigned to a project manager within that provider. That takes some time. Again, depending on the provider, it can take a day or two, or it could take a week. Depends on the provider. So you go and you get assigned to the project manager. That project manager is then going to go through and look at the actual order, what's involved, what's required, what other things come into play, and start looking through their lists of what they need to start triggering. Most providers have an automated system or a provisioning platform that says, okay, we have to do step 1 before step 2 can happen. So knowing what your steps are in this process down make a big difference. We ask you questions along the lines of, well, before we even look at circuits, for instance, we're looking at, is the provider already in the building? Are they in the IMPO? Do they have a ROE, right of entry with the building? Can they run their own riser? Who's running the riser? Is there a riser management company? Like, what other layers come into this thing that affect provisioning? If the provider is already in the building, they're in the IMPO, they don't have to negotiate ROE, and they have the ability to run fiber, the cable from the IMPO up to you, it's going to be a much better experience and process for you than if they have to negotiate the ROE and there's a riser management company involved. And why are these things so critical? Well, there's a lot of buildings that have now taken looking at that telecom circuit, that connectivity, the provider, whatever you want to call it, as additional revenue for the building. They know that, hey, if you want to have, provider Zulu come into the building and service you, and this is not unusual. We've seen buildings say, okay, great. We want $5,000 upfront and $1,000 a month in order for you to come into the building and put your stuff on the wall in our IMPO. And this becomes a big problem because that provider is not going to just write that check to that building. And at some point, when they realize they're not going to get it for free, they're going to come back to you and they're going to say, hey, by the way, we can still do this, but it's going to cost you this much more in order to do it. And you're going to have to front that bill. Okay, so order acceptance, order entry, project manager assigned. Project manager at that point is going to start triggering a bunch of different things within that provider's platform. And some stuff is going to get expressed and exposed to you, and some stuff is just going to be hidden to you. And you're just going to see a lull of 30 days, for instance, and not have any idea what's going on. And things that are going on are things like, what's the actual route to your location? Where's the nearest fiber asset? Where's the nearest splice point asset? What equipment needs to be ordered? They're going to want a room readiness survey. Like, they're going to send somebody out to actually inspect the location and make sure that it's got everything that you need. So these are things that you can shortcut, for instance. You're going to have wall space with baseboard. You're going to have electrical power within, the closer the better. Call it 10 feet of where their equipment's going to go. You have to have a U for ground. If you don't have these things, they're going to come out and they're going to look at it and they're going to say, hey, great, we found a place where we're going to put our equipment, but there's no baseboard, there's no power, and there's no ground. Put all that stuff in, let us know when it's there, and then we'll come back out and we'll check and take pictures of it and make sure it's ready to go. So if you have that ready before the survey takes place, they're going to come out and they go, check, it's great. Or, by the way, pro tip, you can take pictures of all this stuff and immediately send it to PM and say, this is our wall, this is a baseboard, here's a diagram, here's how much space it is, here's the distance between the receptacle and the thing, here's where the ground is, here's the distance between the ground and the thing. And a lot of times you can skip the requirement to actually have somebody come out and do the survey because you've already done the survey and you've already provided the information. If you can do that, you can accelerate the process a little bit. Now, big difference between phone companies and cable companies on provisioning is where their PMs are in the world, what the PM's authority level is, if they're just reading from a screen and not actually using their brains, or if they're using their brains and actually engaged and involved in the process. You're going to have a very different experience in provisioning based on those things. You're going to have a very different experience in provisioning if the provider has to do any outside plant work, construction. So this is things like, let's say, installing fiber. There's no fiber in your building. So in order to get fiber in the building, we have to find the path to the building. And you can do conduit, so subterranean, or you could do aerial. By the way, pro tip, if they're trying to do a conduit subterranean access into your building and they can't find conduit or the conduit's full, you can always just say, hey, can we do an aerial drop and, run a cable from the telephone pole to the building, go through a weatherhead and down. And if you have the ability to mount a weatherhead on the side of the building, you can do a much cheaper installation. You can get a weatherhead for a couple $1,000s installed versus if you're trenching a parking lot, numbers just go crazy really quickly. $40,000 because we've got to trench 6,000 feet of parking lot. Like, okay, great. That's just what it costs. Okay, let me go back to this. So, if outside plant, right? If you've got outside plant work that has to be done, they're going to come out, they're going to figure out the path, and they're going to do a process called rod and rope. So you're going to have a crew that's going to come out, and that crew is going to push like literally a flexible rod through the conduit with pull tape attached to it. After the pull tape gets to the desk, to inside the building, they pull rope. They attach rope to the pull tape and they pull the rope through. Now, depending on the provider, that same crew is going to actually do the fiber pull. A lot of providers, rod and rope is different from the actual fiber pull. So then another crew comes out with a truck with fiber on it with a spool and they attach the fiber to the rope and they pull the fiber into the building. Then you've got maybe another crew that comes out to do the splicing. Then you've got another crew that could come out and do equipment placement and termination. And you've got another crew that can come out and do the actual in-building extension. The point of all this is how long does it take? It depends. And it depends on everything. And it's frustrating because chances are somebody else inside the organization is saying, hey, when can we have this? And they've never done this before and they don't understand. And this is why that anybody that does this a lot will usually come back and say, I don't know how long it's going to take. We're going to find out, or they're going to give you something more akin to, based on what we know and what we can see today, we think this installation is going to take between 45 and 60 days. Or we're pretty confident this installation is going to take between 60 and 90 days. Or guess what? You're doing construction, which means automatically it's going to take between 120 and 150 days. By the way, along the way in these construction projects, things can go really sideways on you, right? What's an example of that? Oh, we need to pull cable along telephone poles, but because it's in a fire-prone area, we had to do a weight loading study on the telephone poles, and the telephone poles are at capacity, so we can't pull fiber on the telephone poles. We have to replace them first, and we have to replace 6 of them. And by the way, do you want to spend the money to replace those 6 of them? But now that we know this, it's triggered this event, so we have to replace them anyways, but it's going to take us 6 months to replace them. So after that 6 months is expired, or, and they're all done, then we can start working on your fiber. Or what's another good one? Oh, we're going to pull cable along the telephone poles, but the telephone poles have trees next to them, which means we need to have the arborist from the county on site as we trim the tree branches to pull the cables to make sure that we're not damaging the trees. No joke, I've had this happen. Well, okay, great. When can the arborist get out? Well, one's on leave, the other's booked for 9 months. So we can schedule the work for you in 9 months when they're available. Or if something happens and we can get to you sooner, we'll schedule it sooner. Like, what do? You don't do anything. You wait until the arborist is available. This is why I say, if anybody is promising you something, in the process, they're just lying to you because they do not know, and there's no way for them to know. You just don't know. You don't know until you know. And it depends on a lot of different things. They don't know if the building is going to allow you to pull cable between the MPO and your floor. They don't know if the building's going to try to extract revenue from an ROE and fees. They don't know if the conduit is compromised and has to be replaced with a tree root. They don't know, and you can't know either. Now, there's things that you can do to make this process better for you, right? Things that we do automatically. Is the provider in the building? Do they have equipment in the building? Does the equipment have capacity on it in the building? Being in the building and having capacity are two different things, by the way. Being in the building means that they're there. Having capacity means they actually have a port they can plug into without placing additional equipment, which could trigger all of those other events. It could trigger a new deal with the building. It could trigger, a time delay, equipment placement. There's a bunch of different things if there's no capacity on the equipment, it triggers. Broadband versus dedicated fiber has a very different provisioning cycle attached to it. First off, you're not signing a contract, you're signing an order form that has terms and conditions attached to it that you cannot negotiate. The timeline, there's no PM assigned on a broadband order. Like, it just goes into a queue, and a technician has a queue, and when they get their work assignment on their tablet or their phone or their device, whatever they're using, it says, go here and install this thing. And they just show up. It's frustrating because you're not going to get advance notice. You're usually going to get like, hey, I'm at your building ready to install, this service for you. And you're going to say, well, okay, great. We'll be right there. It's a frustrating process, but it just is the way that it works. That technician's going to come out and they're going to try to, do the whole work and be done. Broadband can install incredibly fast. We tell people broadband orders, in terms of a timeline, will install in under 30 days. The order submission process, order acceptance process is completely different. Like, for instance, our team is actually placing the order with that service provider in their system. It doesn't go to a different person for them to do order acceptance. Like, we just enter it. Like, boom, you gain a week. Right? Like, you just gain a week in timeline because it doesn't go through that process. So if you've got a new building that you're installing and you have a rush for connectivity requirements, we will absolutely 100% order broadband for you and get the broadband circuit come up as the DIA circuits are being provisioned. We have some clients, I think we're like, it's funny. Some people, it's like you're trying to pull a fast one over on them because you're trying to get them a broadband circuit. And it's like, look, we're just going to cancel it when the other one's there. Like, what do you want here? Yeah, it's not going to be as good, but at least you have connectivity. You can get your network stack up and running. Yeah, you have to reconfigure your firewall with new IP addresses when you cut over to it. And that's a drag. But you know what? Like, using SD-WAN and don't have the impact, it's not that big of a deal. What else should we talk about here for a second? ILEC, RBOC versus CLEC versus MSO. If you don't know those acronyms, incumbent local exchange carrier, also known as the Regional Bell Operating Company. This is the actual phone company that has the territory where your location is. So ILEC or RBOC. The ILECs, the RBOCs are contracting out a lot of this process to third parties, and they're doing that for costs. If they did it in-house, it's expensive for them. It's union. It's got a lot of complexity to it. There's a lot of legal requirements that they have for it. So how do you get around that? You eradicate the positions and you go to third parties, what does that cause for you? It causes all sorts of other problems. So in the ILEC and RBOC worlds, you have, who are the big ones, right? Your big ones that you know in the United States are AT&T, Verizon. Now it's called, Lumen. So what was CenturyLink, and in some markets, what was Quest before that? We have Frontier, we have these entities. Now, I will tell you that they're not all the same in terms of how long they take to provision. Some are much faster than others. They all have annoying processes. But if you are in AT&T territory versus Lumen territory versus Verizon territory versus Frontier territory, you're going to have very different experiences. And by the way, if you're using a phone company and you're ordering circuits out of that phone company's market, you are adding time to your installation, because that phone company is going to go and do what's called type 2 service. They're going to take and order the loop and the capacity from the actual phone company that's in that market. So then you're dealing with two phone companies in provisioning. So you've got to deal with the one that you've ordered with, and then you've got to also deal with the one that they've ordered with in order to get the service installed. That can create all sorts of permutations and variables. In terms of like timelines, some quirky things. Lumen is operating a bunch of different networks at this point. So depending on what product you order and what network that product is related to, you're going to have a very, like ordering an EPL circuit, which was legacy CenturyLink, very different experience than if you're ordering, an orange or red network from what was level 3 or TW Telecom. And a big like hint here is if you're ordering with Lumen is understanding, like maybe what you do is you just order one type of network circuit from capacity that's in that building, and you replace it. Again, we talked about this replacement earlier. The trick here is understand what you're getting into. And are you dealing with CenturyLink LEC, or are you dealing with the level 3 wholesale? Wholesale is the easiest way to express it, side of the house, these like legacy level 3 assets. Lumen no longer does fiber extensions for a lot of their locations. This creates a problem for some people. And, why do they not do fiber extensions? It's expensive and it's a pain in the butt. So they stopped. They don't do it anymore. You have to do your own fiber extension, or you have to pay them a small fortune for them to do the fiber extension for you and lose the time. Just have your low voltage contractor do the fiber extension for you. It's not a big deal. And by the way, it's faster because you call them up, they show up and they install it. And you don't have to go through like 15 layers of bureaucracy in order to get it done. Verizon has a very special provisioning process. Frontier, good luck. It's just, they are what they are. Cable companies, for as much flack as they get and as, not good as their broadband circuits are, they install really fast. Cable companies, as an aggregate, like go across the board, install really fast. Spectrum, Comcast, Cox, you can hate their broadband product because of the way the network architecture works and capacity issues with it. But guess what? It installs really fast. So the name of the game here becomes redundancy and having different carriers and different providers with different access mechanisms into the building, working in concert with a good SD-WAN to have the best experience. Circling all the way back to the beginning, right? Like, how long does this take? I don't know. Well, anybody who tries to tell you that they know just doesn't know, because anybody that's been doing this for amount of time and has any amount of installations under their belt is just the permutations of weird things that you see is just, they're going to tell you like, oh, it's probably going to take like 45 days, right? Like they're going to do everything they can to get it done faster. We're going to do everything we can to get it installed for you faster. I mean, just think about it. Like the faster we get it installed, we don't have to deal with it anymore. Of course, we want to get installed as fast as possible. The trick there becomes until you actually start the project, all you have is you have an estimate. And once you start the project and you start looking at the things, then you actually understand what you actually are dealing with, and then you can start figuring out what you're working with. There's some things, and I won't go deeper into this, but some providers just install faster than others. Some providers have better processes than others. Some providers have crazier things than others. So I will tell you, if we're working on a project together and trying to get connectivity and a fiber installed in your building, part of our recommendation stack that we're going to give you is going to be based on how quickly and how sane that provider is going to be for you to get you service. I'm Max Clark. I hope this helps you. If you have questions, please comment below, send me an email, and we'll walk you through it and help you as much as we can.
Feel it.